China continues to deepen its relationship with Africa as it took several more steps toward foreign assistance and greater understanding. What benefits will both sides derive from these developments? And from space, the first photographic images at a massive black hole captured much of the world's imagination. What does it say about scientific advances and global cooperation? Welcome to The Point, an opinion show coming to you from Beijing. I'm Li Xin. China's foreign aid to Africa is back in the spotlight thanks to several recent events. As a team of Chinese doctors and rescuers returned from cyclone-hit Mozambique, where they helped to battle an outbreak of cholera, a shipment of food donations headed out from Shanghai to Africa, where it will feed some 300,000 hungry people in Somalia, South Sudan, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Meanwhile, in Beijing, the new China-Africa Institute opened its doors, aiming to study and deepen the relationship between China and Africa. The returning doctors and the donated food, though, symbolize a broader trend. In recent years, China has emerged as an important donor of international assistance, and African countries specifically top the list of recipients of Chinese foreign aid. What explains China's growing emphasis on overseas assistance, and how prominent is Africa in the picture? What are China's objectives from a humanitarian and political standpoint, and at a time when Western donors are under pressure to downsize their foreign aid, is growing Chinese assistance being viewed in a more favorable light? Joining our discussion in the studio is Ryder, the CEO of Development Reimagined, an international development consultancy. Hannah, thank you very much for joining us here in the studio. Let me ask you this question about this China-Africa Institute. I understand that President Xi sent a letter of congratulation to this institute. He said that China and Africa, as the biggest developing country and continent with most of the developing countries located, there is a need to strengthen inter-civilizational mutual learning. So exactly how much do we know about this institute, and how do you envision that this is going to do to facilitate this kind of mutual learning?
Yes, well, it is great news that this institute has been created, and at the same time, we also don't know that many details. It was launched just a few days ago, and we also there's still the director to be appointed for it. Also, it would be great if it is in partnership with an African institute. We don't know exactly which one that will be, and but we do know here in China it will be based in the CAS. Which is in
Chinese
Beijing.
Academy of Social Sciences.
Exactly,
yeah.
Which will be in Beijing. So it should be a welcome development, and hopefully, as you say, enhance the mutual understanding with more research, joint research ideally being done by Chinese and African researchers.
Why is that necessary? Why is that urgent even? I understand this is one of the 8 initiatives, right, announced during the second FOCAC Forum, which was held last year, when many African heads of state were in China. Why such an institute is necessary and urgent? Because there are various big or small institutions or schools which kind of specialize in African studies, but this one seems to be different.
Of course. We don't yet know exactly how it will be different, but the fact that it is in Beijing is very important, because this is the center of government, so hopefully even more impactful in terms of the Chinese government direction. At the same time, it does need to have that African input into it, because the more that African partners provide information about what's happening on the African continent, that will make sure that the Institute is really keeping up to date with what's really happening on the ground.
From your understanding of China-Africa collaboration and cooperation and interaction over the past few years, especially in the past decade, what do you think would be the most important subjects that need to be researched on, that the two sides need to know more, for instance, from the Chinese side? Especially, right, we're talking about the Chinese Institute.
Look, there's so many different topics. From the Chinese side, there's much more to learn about exactly what different African countries look like, what they need, what their sustainable development goes. Well, this is one major theme of discussion in China, and even when we speak to Chinese businesses looking to operate in African countries, that is always one key message that we have to share. Every single country has such different characteristics. And then from the African side, the understanding of China and the understanding of, look, we don't have any information on how different types of Chinese aid is distributed across African countries. So this is something that this institute could be working on quite quickly on a range of different issues.
Yeah, indeed, it's a little bit fuzzy, let's say, the information about China's foreign assistance, foreign aid to Africa. We did a little bit of research, and the most recent information that's specific to Africa only came from a government white paper, which was released in 2014, and it only talked about statistics from 2011 to 2012.
Yes.
So the picture is rather incomplete. We understand that for those 2 years, China spent, or China appropriated about $14 billion for foreign assistance, and that is not just to Africa, by the way. That is for all of China's foreign assistance. So tell us a bit about your understanding of the kind of shift that has been taking place in China's foreign international assistance, especially when it comes to Africa.
Well, as you say, we don't know very much, because even that data that you just talked about wasn't broken down by country. It was broken down by region. So we do know that 51% of that 14.4 billion was dedicated to African countries, which is good in itself, and over 50% went to the least developed countries across the world as well, which is another good indication. We understand, we can see that there have been increases in foreign assistance from China. For example, even for the Ebola outbreak, since there was a major contribution in humanitarian assistance in the on the African continent. And there was also in 2015 a big announcement of a South-South cooperation fund, which then became operational from 2016. At the same time, we still don't have further figures, and we don't have figures which are broken down. So we're able to see different, by looking at specific sectors. So last year, for example, my consultancy firm did some examination of the Confucius Institutes and how that has changed over time.
Yeah.
So once you look into specific topics, you can start to see the trends over time, and you can see that foreign aid from China has been increasing on the African continent, but you need to be looking at it in depth.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just been told that we are joined by another guest, Tang Xiaoyang, Deputy Director of the Carnegie-Tsinghua Center for Global Policy, joining us from Boston. So, Mr. Tang, thank you very much for joining us. So, given what we have talked about, the inauguration of the China-Africa Institute, and then the shift or the growing importance of Africa in China's international assistance effort, how do you look at the importance of Africa in general in terms of China's international assistance, and is that trend going to pick up even more in the near future?
It's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, certainly Africa has just increased its importance in China's overall international engagements. And for me, then it's not only about assistance, but rather a lot of the cooperation is about economic, trade, and investment. Actually, the official assistance is just a type of cooperation, and in connection with the investment and trade. And in fact, that's the unique characteristic of Chinese engagements with African countries, because China sees Africa as a promising land of development. And China wants to transfer its successful experience of development to the continent, and meanwhile wants to also benefit from this kind of development in the continent.
So it's not just the international assistance per se that have been, that this concept describes inherently, but it's a hybrid of economic collaboration or co-development with foreign assistance. Is that what you're talking about, Mr. Tang? Why does China do it this way? Then is it still a kind of foreign assistance we're talking about? Yeah,
I think for internationally, foreign assistance, they have a narrow definition, but also a broader definition. The definition in narrow sense, that may come from the Western countries, which just specify the assistance provided without any commercial purposes as the official foreign assistance. But actually China, from its own experience, it finds out that pure assistance, especially the development assistance, doesn't really, cannot effectively help the countries, the recipient countries, get out of the poverty trap.
Okay.
Therefore, then they actually made a combination of the both of the assistance in narrow sense and broader in the.
Let's put the concepts, the discussion about concepts aside and look at what China is doing here. A very important trend some people are noting is that China is shifting more from a recipient of international aid to a donor of international aid, especially on the continent of Africa. Why is that the case? Does that mean that China is not seeing itself more as a developing country, just as other developing countries, or is China doing that from a counterpart, a peer's perspective, as a developing country helping another developing country? If that is the case, then how about the poor people here in China? Why should China be sending food abroad when it still has poverty-stricken people domestically?
In fact, China's assistance to other countries has not just started. China had a long history of assisting African, also other Asian countries since the 1960s. And so China has always been a recipient as well as a donor. But increasingly, China has added more and more emphasis on the assistance part, because as China developed, then the aid they receive from other countries has also been decreasing. And while China found out it has more and more responsibility to help other countries.
Okay.
And so this is
Yeah. Okay, Haiyan, let me get back to you here. How is China's international aid, or whatever you call it, viewed in Africa by the local people? Do they see it as an act of friendship? Do they see it as opportunity for economic development, socio and economic development, or is there some kind of suspicion as to the objective behind China's kindness?
It's extremely difficult to make generalizations. In some cases, it is seen as very positive. In some cases, it's seen as quite challenging and needs to be improved. I think overall what we can say is that there's always room for improvement for any type of aid, whether it's from China, whether it's from the UK or elsewhere. We have to make steps to improve it, make sure that aid is really meeting the needs of poorest people in developing countries. And whether it's China or the UK or the US, they've been working on this for a very long time and they still haven't got it right. So there's a lot more to do from the recipient countries to make their views heard, to make their needs well understood, and that goes for China as well as many others.
All right, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to Ryder, the CEO of Development Reimagined, an international development consultancy, and from Boston, Tang Xiaoyang, Deputy Director of the Carnegie-Tsinghua Center for Global Policy.